Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling a pretty fascinating piece. It's a devotional titled "Fight for Your Finances."
Ooh,
We're looking specifically at Key Point 21, La Benediction, from podcast21.pdf.
interesting, yeah. Even the title, it has a certain intensity to it.
It does. It feels like we're about to uncover some kind of secret battle plan for financial success, with a spiritual twist.
Right.
I'm curious to see, what kind of fight this devotional is actually talking about.
Yeah, well, let's dive in and see what we can uncover. The core message seems to be that God desires his followers to be prosperous.
Okay.
And it links this prosperity to obedience and applying biblical principles. It cites scriptures like Proverbs 3.66 and 3 John 2, which talk about riches and prosperity as blessings from God.
So it's not just about wanting a bigger bank account,
Right.
but about seeing financial success as like a tangible sign of God's favor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the devotional really emphasizes the need to cultivate a prosperity mindset. It even goes so far as to say that mentalities are fortresses. Now, that metaphor makes me think, It suggests that our thoughts and beliefs can either hold us back or propel us forward.
So we're trapped in a mental prison of our own making when it comes to finances.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And to break free, the devotional encourages readers to identify and dismantle those mental barriers that might be preventing them from achieving financial success. It even draws a parallel to Isaiah 53.6, which talks about straying from God's path, implying that negative thoughts about finances could be a form of straying.
Okay, so we're starting to see how this fight plays out. It's
Right.
not just about external circumstances, but about conquering those internal mental obstacles.
Yes.
But how do you go about breaking down these mental fortresses?
Right.
The text mentions key prayers. What role do they play in all of this?
Prayer seems to be the central weapon in this financial fight, according to the devotional. It even provides specific prayer requests, some of which are quite striking.
Okay.
For instance, there are prayers for favor even in the face of adversity, breaking generational cycles of poverty, and even releasing blessings that the enemy might be hiding.
Hold on a second. Blessings that the enemy might be hiding. That's an interesting idea.
Isn't it? It introduces this whole concept of a spiritual battle taking place in the realm of finances. That's almost like a hidden treasure map. And prayer is the key to unlocking those hidden riches.
I'm starting to see how this devotional is building this narrative of a spiritual quest for financial abundance.
Yeah.
It's really engaging, you have to admit. But it also raises questions for me.
Sure.
If God truly desires us to prosper, why would these blessings be hidden in the first place? It seems a bit counterintuitive.
That's a valid point.
Yeah.
It definitely invites further exploration of the theological nuances at play here. But for now, keep following this thread. The devotional doesn't stop at prayer. It goes on to introduce a program called 2025 Uppercut Arise.
Ooh, Uppercut. That sounds like we're moving from prayer to a full-on spiritual boxing match now.
Right.
What's this program all about?
It seems to be a call to action for Christians to wake up and actively engage in this fight for their finances, family, and future.
Okay.
It's like a rallying cry, urging them to step into their God-given potential, but with this added layer of urgency and action.
It's interesting that this call to action comes from Pastor Ghislaine, who, according to the text, leads a French-speaking church in Minnesota.
Huh.
He's described as wearing many hats: husband, father, author, editor, certified interpreter, mentor, and even a nurse in training.
Wow.
It's a pretty diverse background.
It is.
And it speaks to the potential reach of this message.
Yeah.
It suggests that this idea of fighting for your blessings isn't confined to a specific denomination or even language group. It's targeting a potentially broad audience.
Right.
So we're seeing how this devotional weaves together financial prosperity with spiritual obedience and this concept of actively fighting for one's blessings.
Yes.
But this raises another question for me.
Okay.
If God already has a plan for our prosperity, does that mean we don't have free will?
Right.
Are we just puppets in this grand cosmic scheme?
That's where things get really interesting. We're starting to touch on some of the age-old debates about free will versus predestination. And it seems this devotional might have some answers, or at least a specific perspective. But before we go down that rabbit hole, I think it's time we take a closer look at this whole prosperity gospel concept. It's a complex, sometimes controversial idea, and understanding its historical context will help us better grasp the message of this devotional.
Absolutely. We've laid the groundwork. Now it's time to delve into the bigger picture. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back.
All right, so we've been unpacking this devotional's idea of fighting for financial blessings, but now let's zoom out a bit. What can you tell us about the prosperity gospel and where this idea kind of fits into the larger landscape of Christianity? Well, the prosperity gospel, it's often called, is a belief system that gained traction, particularly in 20th century America. It emphasizes the idea that God wants believers to be not just spiritually wealthy, but materially wealthy too.
So it's kind of like the American dream, but with a divine twist.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And it taps into a long-standing tradition in American thought, this idea that success is a sign of God's favor. Think back to the Puritans and their belief in hard work and worldly success as evidence of their chosen status.
Okay.
You can see echoes of that in the prosperity gospel.
That's fascinating. So this devotional is drawing on some pretty deep cultural and historical roots. But you mentioned it being controversial. Why is that?
Well, not everyone within Christianity agrees with the prosperity gospel's interpretation of Scripture. Some critics argue that it oversimplifies the complex relationship between faith and wealth. They worry that it can lead to a very transactional view of faith, where people feel like they're bargaining with God.
Right. Like,
If I do this, then God will give me that.
that makes sense. It seems like it could put a lot of pressure on people, especially those who are struggling financially.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
if I'm not wealthy, is it because my faith isn't strong enough?
Exactly. And that's where some of the ethical concerns come in.
Right.
Critics also point out that the prosperity gospel can sometimes be used to exploit vulnerable people who are desperate for financial breakthrough. There have been cases of preachers asking for large donations with the promise of guaranteed blessings,
Right.
which can be very problematic.
That's troubling to hear. So it's not all sunshine and roses when it comes to this prosperity gospel.
No, it's definitely a complex issue with a lot of different perspectives. Even within the prosperity gospel movement, there are variations and nuances in how it's interpreted and preached.
This is reminding me of something that struck me in the devotional. It talks a lot about having the right mindset for prosperity, but it doesn't seem to offer many concrete financial strategies. Is that typical of the prosperity gospel? Is it more about believing than doing?
That's a good observation. A lot of the emphasis in the prosperity gospel is placed on aligning yourself with God's will and believing that abundance will flow naturally from that alignment. It often focuses on transforming your thoughts and beliefs about money rather than, say, giving specific budgeting advice or investment tips.
So it's like attracting wealth through the power of positive thinking.
In a way, yes, but it's not just about positive thinking in general. It's about cultivating a specific prosperity mindset, rooted in the belief that God wants you to be wealthy and will provide for you abundantly.
That's helpful to clarify. It's not just generic optimism, but a very specific kind of faith-based approach to finances. But how would you explain this prosperity mindset to someone who's, never encountered this concept before?
Imagine it like this. Your mindset is like a garden.
Okay.
If you plant seeds of doubt, fear, and scarcity, that's what will grow. But if you plant seeds of faith, abundance, and gratitude, you'll cultivate a mindset that attracts prosperity. It's about shifting your internal beliefs about money and your own worthiness to receive it.
That's a great analogy. It really helps paint a picture of what this mindset shift might look like. And I guess prayer plays a big role in cultivating that mindset, right?
Absolutely.
We talked about those key prayers in the devotional.
Absolutely. Prayer is seen as a powerful tool for aligning yourself with God's will and claiming those blessings. It's about actively engaging with the spiritual realm and believing that your prayers have the power to unlock financial breakthroughs.
It's interesting how this all ties back to the idea of fighting that we discussed earlier.
Right.
It's not just about sitting back and hoping for the best. It's about actively changing your mindset, praying for guidance, and, taking steps towards achieving your financial goals.
You got it. It's a proactive approach to faith and finances, even if the specifics of those steps might be left more to the individual to figure out.
As we're talking about all of this, I'm wondering what our listeners are thinking. Have you ever encountered similar messages about wealth and faith? Maybe in your own religious upbringing or in books or podcasts you've listened to. How do these messages make you feel?
It's a good moment to pause and reflect. This whole conversation about prosperity and blessings can be quite thought-provoking, can't it?
Yeah.
It touches on some fundamental beliefs we hold about ourselves, our relationship with money, and our understanding of God's role in our lives.
It really does. And speaking of God's role, I'm curious to go back to that idea of blessings that the enemy might be hiding. It implies that there's a spiritual battle happening, like behind the scenes, even when it comes to our finances.
Yes, that's a powerful image, isn't it? It suggests that our financial struggles might not be just random bad luck or poor choices, but the result of spiritual forces working against us. And it raises the question, who or what is this enemy?
That's what I'm wondering. Is it a literal being, like Satan?
Hmm.
Or is it more of a, metaphorical enemy, like our own negative thoughts or limiting beliefs?
That's where things get a bit more open to interpretation.
Right.
The devotional doesn't explicitly define the enemy, which allows for, different interpretations. Some people might take it literally, while others might see it as a symbol for the obstacles and challenges we face in life.
It's almost like a detective story now. We're piecing together clues from this devotional,
Right.
trying to understand this whole concept of fighting for your finances. We've got the prosperity gospel, the power of mindset, the role of prayer, and now this mysterious enemy lurking in the shadows.
Exactly. And it makes me think of something else that this devotional hints at. This idea of generational blessings and curses. Remember, the devotional talks about breaking cycles of poverty through prayer. That suggests that our financial situation might be influenced not just by our own actions, but by the actions of our ancestors as well.
Whoa, that adds a whole other layer to this.
Right.
So it's not just about our own personal fight, but about breaking free from potentially negative patterns that have been passed down through generations.
It seems so. And this idea of generational blessings and curses is actually quite widespread in various cultures and spiritual traditions. It's a fascinating topic in itself.
I'm sensing another deep dive brewing. But before we get sidetracked, let's bring it back to the devotional. And this program, it mentions 2025 Uppercut Arise. We talked about it being a call to action, but I'm curious, what kind of action is it calling for?
Well, the devotional doesn't go into specifics about the program itself. It seems to be something that readers are encouraged to explore further on their own. But based on the language used, Uppercut Arise, it definitely evokes a sense of urgency and empowerment.
Like a wake-up call to claim your God-given right to prosperity.
Exactly. It's about taking ownership of your financial destiny and partnering with God to achieve those goals.
It strikes me that this whole message of fighting for your finances might be particularly appealing in today's world, where so many people feel like they're struggling financially.
That's a great point. In times of economic uncertainty, people are often looking for hope and a sense of control. And the prosperity gospel offers a very attractive narrative that with the right mindset and faith, you can overcome financial challenges and achieve abundance.
It's like a spiritual antidote to financial anxiety.
You could say that, but of course it's important to remember that not everyone finds comfort in this type of message. For some, it might feel like too much pressure or even a distortion of true faith.
Right, and it's always important to approach these ideas with a critical eye, to consider the nuances and potential pitfalls alongside the promises.
Absolutely. It's about finding what resonates with you personally and aligning your beliefs with your actions. But one thing's for sure, this deep dive has certainly given us a lot to think about.
It really has. We've explored the devotional's message, the historical and theological context of the prosperity gospel, the power of mindset, the role of prayer, this concept of a spiritual battle, and even touched on the idea of generational blessings and curses.
And along the way, we've asked a lot of questions. But maybe the most important question is, how does all of this resonate with you, the listener? What are your own beliefs about the relationship between faith and finances?
That's a great question to ponder as we move into the final part of our deep dive. Stick with us because we're going to wrap things up with some final thoughts and a provocative question to leave you with. Wow, we've covered some serious ground in this deep dive into Fight for Your Finances. From the concept of a prosperity mindset to that idea of spiritual battles happening over finances, it's been quite a journey.
It really has. We've explored the historical roots of the prosperity gospel, its controversial aspects, and how this devotional frames financial success as both a sign of God's favor and something you actively pursue.
And we've touched on some pretty deep theological questions along the way, like free will versus predestination.
Right.
And the role of prayer in shaping our financial realities.
All from analyzing just one devotional. It's amazing how a single text can open up so many avenues for exploration.
Right. And it highlights the importance of engaging with these ideas critically, not just accepting them at face value.
Yeah.
Because as we've discussed, the prosperity gospel isn't without its critics and potential downsides.
Exactly. It's about finding a balance. recognizing that while faith can be a powerful motivator and source of strength, it's not a guaranteed formula for financial success.
You know, this reminds me of something else that stood out to me in the devotional. The emphasis on personal responsibility. While it talks about God's desire for our prosperity, it also stresses the importance of, aligning our actions with our beliefs.
Yes.
Hmm.
It's not about passively waiting for blessings to fall into our laps.
Right.
It's about actively working towards our goals,
Yeah.
making wise decisions, and cultivating a mindset of abundance.
So it's not just about praying for a windfall, but about taking practical steps to improve our financial situation.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that we have a role to play in shaping our own destiny, while also acknowledging that ultimately we're not in complete control.
It's a delicate balance for sure. And it brings us back to that core question we've been wrestling with throughout this whole deep dive. What is the relationship between faith and finances?
Right. Is financial prosperity truly a sign of God's favor? Or is it more about how we use our resources, regardless of how much or how little we have?
Yeah, is it about seeking material wealth as an end in itself? Or is it about viewing our finances as a tool for serving a greater purpose?
These are questions that each individual has to grapple with for themselves.
Yeah.
There's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Right. And ultimately, this deep dive wasn't about providing all the answers. It was about prompting you, the listener, to think critically and explore your own beliefs about the complex interplay between faith and finances.
We've provided the framework, the historical context, the theological nuances, and even some personal reflections. Now it's up to you to continue the exploration.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we'll leave you with a final thought-provoking question to ponder. What does true prosperity mean to you?
Does it encompass more than just financial abundance?
What role does faith play in your financial decisions?
And how can you use your resources, whether big or small, to make a positive impact on the world around you?
Keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep